Welcome everyone to the Yissilmissil Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissil, and today we are continuing our deep dive into the Bermuda Triangle. We're starting a new book, The Bermuda Triangle II, by Gian J. Quasar. So we have a new intro for the show, built up off of the last one, but I think it's quite fitting now with what we know so far. So this book is the follow-up to the one we just finished reading. And it is from 2017. It's titled The Bermuda Triangle II, An Odyssey of Unexplained Disappearances at Sea by Gian J. Quasar. So we'll read the back like we do with every book. We'll read the back of this right now. The quote, man with the unlikely name, end quote, is the only popular investigator to have risen through the ranks of the quote, unexplained, end quote, to command the respect of the mainstream. Best-selling author Randy Wayne White wrote, quote, the danger of Gian J. Quasar's fascination with mysteries, often assigned to paranormal causes, is that readers will assume his writing is tainted with secret advocacy and bias, like the majority of hacks who litter this field. Readers, rest easy. Quasar is a superb writer and researcher and stands alone at the top of this unusual field. Through Quasar, the genre is elevated, finally, to equal, even exceeds, the highest standards of investigative journalism, end quote. His investigative talents have followed him to successfully bridge the gap between such topics and the heavy world of cold case to attain the distinction of, quote, citizen sleuth, end quote. He is consulted by police investigators and special task forces on major homicide cold cases. Until he earned his own unique moniker, quote, Q-Man, end quote, he was often called the, quote, real-life Kolchak, end quote. Here he returns to the X-Files field. He is regarded as the undisputed world expert. His first book on the subject, Into the Bermuda Triangle, was declared by no less than Whitley Strieber to be, quote, the best book, end quote, written on the topic. And we just finished reading that entire book. Deceptively gorgeous, hypnotically inviting, the tropical Bermuda Triangle has lured thousands, not to their deaths, but to eternal mystery. Of all the so-called, quote, paranormal, end quote, mysteries that have captured the world's imagination, the Bermuda Triangle is the one substantive subject. The area's deadly enigma of missing ships and planes is real. It is not based on subjective findings and claims. The ships were real. The airplanes were real. and the thousands they carried have vanished without trace. One man set out to find the truth. And this is what we'll be reading through the end of January. It is jam-packed, and I can't wait to get through this with y'all. So today we are reading Chapter 1. And by the way, this is a first edition of the book, and it has not been read yet either. But we're starting with Chapter 1, titled The Bermuda Triangle, An Enduring Mystery. So before I begin, I just want to remind everyone, hit the like button below. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing. And that's about it. We will get the Illuminati. Come on out. There she is. Alright. So, are y'all ready? This will not be as dense in material as last night's show on Coral Castle. That was a doozy. I anticipated it going 2 hours, and we went 4 hours. But today is a little bit lighter of a read. There's not too many insert photographs in here, so we'll mostly be reading for tonight. And we'll be going about 2 hours. Possibly a little less than that, so we'll see. But let's begin. Chapter 1. The Bermuda Triangle. An Enduring Mystery. The covers of all world newspapers captivated readers when they detailed the puzzling facts behind the inexplicable disappearance of a huge Boeing 777 carrying 239 people on a routine flight over Malaysia. Such a chilling event, played out over hours, was declared to be contrived without obvious reason, cunningly executed and heinously premeditated. I am not trying to use an excessive number of adjectives to get your attention, but I want the reader to understand the gravity of such a scenario when it happens hundreds of times along the busiest coast in the USA. In the most crowded and guarded sea and airways, in circumstances that are even more incredible. For these disappearances are not just of people quietly taken off course without reason to a point over a huge ocean. They are the sudden and total disappearance of over 1,000 people and the aircraft in which they were flying, or the yachts they were sailing, or even the great freighters they crewed. These are not just boats and planes lost on a big ocean. Their losses are inexplicable as a person disappearing between their door and the corner of their street. Many have vanished just at the edge of the harbor, others while cruising around a peninsula. Many aircraft were on radar, gone in a single sweep of the radar scope, and in some instances, just moments before landing. They disappear as if suddenly plucked from safety without any clue except brief and panicked maydays. Derelict vessels continue to turn up with distressing regularity. Crews are gone, snatched as if by the same hand of mystery, leaving behind them sound and stable ships, yet completely minus any indication why they fled. Disappearances of this character have been puzzling analysts and historians since mankind first began sailing the waters of the New World, making this phenomenon an observed mystery for hundreds of years. What has made the phenomenon so high-profiled and excited so much interest in the last 50 years is the discovery that the disappearances are not random and spread throughout the entire North Atlantic Ocean, but that at a contrast they remain in a comparatively small part of it, a section off the southeast coast of the United States between the island of Bermuda, Miami, Florida, and the Caribbean island of Puerto Rico. This area, frequently known as the Bermuda Triangle, continues to see more disappearances than any other equally trafficked section of ocean on the Earth to this day. This is in spite of modern technology such as GPS, VORs, and the use of radio by which, at the very least, a pilot could give base stations an idea of what was going wrong. So before we continue on, I just want to acknowledge those in the chat. Thank you for being here, Missing Time 420, and of course, my mama. Good to have you here. As I said last night, it's always great when my parents can watch what I'm creating on this platform. So, thank you. And feel free, everyone, to leave comments as we go along here. I will read them eventually. So, let's carry on. When there is radio contact, rather than clarity, the opposite predominates. Jumbled maydays have related, quote, "I don't know what is happening to me," end quote. Quote, "A weird object is in my course," end quote. Quote, "My compass has stopped working," end quote. Or messages indicating that visibility, which previously extended for miles, is now suddenly gone. Replaced by a spontaneously appearing, quote, "fog," end quote, that surrounds the aircraft and forces the pilot to fly on instruments as if in normal meteorological conditions, but in these instances, the instruments are going, quote, "haywire," end quote. Gauges are erratic. The compass is spinning. GPS or LORAN readouts cease or clear to 8888. On some occasions, the pilot is so consumed with trying to understand the circumstances that they are only able to say, quote, "I seem to be having instrument trouble," end quote. Or just, quote, "instrument trouble," end quote, without being able to clarify it, repeating this until they vanish. Normally, the result of losing control is a wide debris field scattered over the ocean, but in the cases where a pilot was able to indicate the, quote, "electronic fog," end quote, before vanishing, little or no debris is found at all. This area, though it is highly trafficked, does not, however, contain any significantly higher number of problems than those that ordinarily vex travelers in other sections of the Earth's oceans. Great hurricanes strike in the area of the triangle, but the ships lost and the aircraft downed leave wreckage that is located, studied, and upon which conclusions as to the cause of the accident can be drawn. In the regular course of events, traffic through the triangle encounters the same vagaries of weather and human interaction. The Coast Guard answers the same type and near the same number of SOS calls as in any other heavily traveled tourist and commercial seas. Yet disappearances remain alarmingly disproportionate. There is, however, one noteworthy difference in the area of the Bermuda Triangle than in other comparable trafficked areas. Its most heavily traveled seas are so shallow they are transparent, or the bottom can be reached on a straight dive. It is precisely here in the triangle's southwest corner where most of the disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle occur. This area covers the vast archipelago of the Bahamas. I butchered that word. Where over 700 islands, their ports and airfields make for easier and safer island hopping through to the Caribbean. In many places, the sea bottom is only a few feet deep. The average depth is about 50 feet. Land and potential safety, even for a shipwrecked crew, is never far. Nevertheless, the disappearances continue without trace of wreckage on the beaches or any visible sign of or shadow of the sunken aircraft or vessel below the thin blanket of azure waters. This last phenomenon extends even over time. Most any wreck in the shallow waters of the Bahamas will attract the growth of turtle grass. The result is an underwater oasis teeming with sea fauna. Such oases easily stand out from the surface as a marled dark green scar in the mirror-clean turquoise shallows. Local divers are very familiar with such locations, and it is not long before the exotic kaleidoscope of a new one attracts their curiosity. Yet, though most of the disappearances have occurred over this archipelago, there are no such unexplained marled areas indicating the presence of uncatalogued wrecks. The most logical, or at least prosaic, explanation is that the aircraft or ships were completely obliterated before they hit the ocean or sank. The frequency of disappearances, however, would suggest anything but prosaic possibilities as the cause. These are not the only mysteries attending the many disappearing ships and planes in the Bermuda Triangle. None has ever sent any ELT or EPIRB signal to base stations. These acronyms represent very powerful automatic alarms, emergency locator transmitter, and emergency position indicating radio beacon that are set in motion by the impacting of an aircraft or float free from a ship when it sinks. They continue to send their electronic mayday for days. Passing aircraft, base stations, and even satellites can easily home in on them. None of the missing, however, though the number must be in the hundreds that carried such devices, have ever sent a signal indicating they impacted for aircraft or sank for ships in any conventional sense of the word. It is becoming more acceptable today to believe that the Bermuda Triangle, for whatever reasons, represents an exception to the way nature traditionally operates on this planet and interacts with travel. It may also be that there is something very different about this part of the planet. Among the disappearances, there is an interesting proportion of travelers who survive unusual encounters and who continue to report odd electromagnetic phenomena and that strange, quote, electronic fog, end quote, that envelops them and, quote, fritzes, end quote, all electronic equipment, including radio, VORS, LORAN, all gauges, and in addition, drains battery power. Taken all together, the entire enigma of the Bermuda Triangle may, if finally unraveled, help us to exploit the very real complex network of forces that surround us. Cause this still mysterious orb to rotate, revolve, and interact with the greater and equally inescapable forces of time and space. At the very least, the Bermuda Triangle represents a challenge for our minds to grasp. One that over 1,000 people have given their lives, presumably, unintentionally, to reveal to us. Every year, and with every new case, as disappearances continue to defy every effort to prevent them, or at least to forestall the sense of mystery attending them, the triangle is slowly being drawn out of the clutches of the, quote, paranormal fringe, end quote, and into the cold, hard light of scientific acceptability. When thousands of tons of shipping and aircraft vanish, it becomes increasingly hard to attribute the disappearances to the supernatural or flirt, however winsomely, with Saturday afternoon pulp theories. Some may find it easier to dismiss the enigma of the Bermuda Triangle by pointing out that disappearances obviously do not happen over land. Looking beyond any prosaic cause, such as, quote, crash and sink, end quote, from pilot error or weather conditions, is therefore merely the penchant of those trying to create mystery where it does not exist. And yet, as true as this is, when it comes to the land versus sea argument anyway, it is equally true that the phenomenon of the, quote, electronic fog, end quote, does not exist over land. Nor does this humbug attitude take into account that the sea itself is a very different medium than land, and that water is essential to conduct that world of electricity, and therewith intensify that more dynamic and still mysterious world of electromagnetism. Nor do navigators on land in any place so frequently encounter odd redirections of their compass as if some unusual electromagnetic event is transiently occurring over the horizon but out of sight. It is so frequent in areas of the Bahamas that shipmasters have taken it for granted. When it occurs, invariably they will say, with the expected bemusement, quote, "It's the Bermuda Triangle," end quote. For pilots or strangers, it is not so amusing an experience. Such is the case with Simon Ludgate, a British documentary producer, in a TBM Avenger, reflying the course of Flight 19. The 5 Avengers, which vanished in 1945 and whose mysterious loss is generally considered to have directed world attention to the area. When he noticed that their compass just stopped before he could even react, they were almost immediately radioed by the chase plane filming them, saying that their compass too had stopped. Such an event, occurring simultaneously, was enough to alarm the otherwise calm filmmaker. Only 3 planes of space exist, and yet only 2 fields of energy are discovered: electricity, and at a right angle to an electric current, a magnetic field. Presupposing Dr. Albert Einstein to be correct, theorists believe a third field of energy should exist. But so far, none other has been discovered. Whether it even exists to be discovered, and obviously there is no information how it must interact with the other two. Gravity is the only other, quote, force, end quote, known. It exists, though it was never truly discovered. It is merely, quote, apparent, end quote, that it exists. Some believe it to be the third field of energy, though established nomenclature considers it not a force, but a, quote, phenomenon, end quote. A word which almost seems to establish its mystery rather than clarify it. It is the most obvious, quote, phenomenon, end quote, about us, and yet, paradoxically, the most mysterious. All that is known is that time itself can be affected by gravity. Since time and gravity are intertwined, if gravity is the third and elusive field, it must be affected by the other two, and therewith the most mysterious world of space and time can be manipulated through electromagnetism. Over the oceans, with their ability to help generate electromagnetism, would be the best place for unexplained and potentially dynamic electromagnetic phenomenon to occur. Specific areas may be more prone to these phenomena based on factors that offer all the right conditions, whether this is humidity, interaction of ocean currents, effects due to rotation of the Earth, or whatever, that allow them to come together to create the startling effects. Theorists, as we shall see, are more and more certain the triangle represents one of these areas, and alarming potential may come about, foreshadowed by the erratic behavior of the boat or plane's electronic equipment. Even if every missing ship and plane could logistically be explained as the result of some already known agent, the interest the Bermuda Triangle has created has led the broadening of our knowledge about time, energy, and mass. Professor David Pares, that's spelled P-A-R-E-S, of the University of Nebraska, has not been put off by the folkloric claims that surround the triangle. Rather, he has come to believe that the, quote, electronic fog, end quote, at the very least, is very real. And the details of one pilot, Bruce Gernon, who experienced its most intense manifestation and who set about to discover what caused him to move 100 miles in space and 30 minutes in time during the period he was enveloped in it, have convinced Pares that Gernon's experience is key to unraveling space and time travel. Other scientists have risen to the challenge, both in the United States, South America, and even as far as Russia, where Dr. Oleg Murchryakov, who has possibly solved the riddle of ball lightning, has attempted to explain the triangle's infamous, quote, electronic fog, end quote. A more in situ attempt to crack at least one of the cases of the triangle has inspired the daughter of a lost pilot to try and correlate his missing aircraft with one unaccounted underwater oasis called, quote, the Eye, end quote, 55 miles east of the island of Bimini on the Great Bahama Bank. Pam Harrison lost her father over 35 years ago on a flight from the Bahamas to North Carolina. Her desire is to mount an expedition to finally clear the sea bottom off the still unidentified wreck to see if its registration number matches that of the aircraft her father flew. Another attempt to unravel some of the mystery of the triangle is taken rather in a piecemeal effort. Dr. Greg Little has been diving in the triangle for decades. No matter what the subject of the dive is, he makes a conscious effort to divert to any wreck to see if he can identify it with one of the many missing in the Bermuda Triangle. Yet, for every attempt to chip away at the legend of the Bermuda Triangle, a new mystery arises or an older one almost seems confirmed. American psychic Edgar Cayce's predictions about the last remnant of Atlantis being found in the waters of the Bermuda Triangle go hand in glove now with the enigma of unexplained megalithic ruins found underwater in the triangle's most exotic corner of the Bahamas. Some individual stones and entire structures are cyclopean in size. Coincidentally, in parentheses, or not so coincidentally, end parentheses, they match colossal prehistoric architecture around the world. Naturally, in parentheses, albeit very unofficially, end parentheses, they are attributed to being Cayce's Atlantis, which he had described as having been a worldwide super civilization, both technologically and in terms of mental powers, with its last surviving section having sunk exactly here 12,000 years ago. Furthermore, he declared this last remnant of the Atlantean civilization to hold the secret electromagnetic power sources of this vanished prehistoric age. Caycean Atlantis and these cyclopean ruins are some of the most alluring components of the legend of the Triangle. Daily, tourists glide over massive stone foundations off Bimini, where Cayce has predicted in 1933 such ruins would be found, and where they indeed were in 1968, and gaze through glass-bottom boats. But nothing approximating a city or even advanced technology has yet been uncovered. Admittedly, the Atlantean theory ably resides with the fringe and paranormal crowd, who propose that these sunken power complexes, designed as they were, according to Cayce's trance readings, to operate on natural forces, could still be down on the sea bottom, causing the electromagnetic aberrations in the triangle that eventually lead to disappearances either by disintegration, by time, space, shift, and warps, or by creating the, quote, electronic fog, end quote, that sends panicked pilots to their doom. Although it is a theory easy to scorn, the idea of an ancient, even prehistoric sunken civilization in the area received startling interest from established circles, including the National Geographic, when Dr. Paulina Zalitsky's bottom scans finally located what appeared to be an ancient and complex city that had been plunged beneath the sea off Cuba long before recorded history. From tests of the surrounding geology, she placed its subsidence back, coincidentally, to 12,000 years ago. The precise time that Casey, in trances, said that the last remnant of a fabulous and advanced civilization sank in the Bahamas and Caribbean. Taken on its own, a sunken city is, of course, more of a tangible rather than paranormal interest to the adventurer and investigator, who must keep a skeptical eye on such claims of prehistory for fear it is belief in Casey rather than objective study that has set the time frame. It is to be noted that Mayan legends and stone glyphs tell of coming to Yucatan after the massive destruction of a city across the Eastern Sea, which must mean the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean, and the sunken city off Cuba could therefore be to what these glyphs refer. The discovery of a sunken city and its coincidence with psychic readings from 85 years ago is yet another of many coincidences in the Bermuda Triangle that cause us to gaze beyond that invisible horizon and wonder at our own mysterious prehistory. This is not the only occasion where the legend of the Triangle has found some form of belated fulfillment in reality. As early as 1962, some form of electromagnetic aberration was suspected to be contributing to the disappearances. The theorizing was inspired by what later were proven to be apocryphal words attributed by an imaginative writer to the pilots of Flight 19, the flight of 5 Navy Avenger torpedo bombers, whose disappearance in 1945 is considered one of the greatest mysteries of aviation. These alarming phrases included, quote, "The compass is going crazy. We don't know where we're at. Even the sea doesn't look as it should," end quote. Although these words were later exploded as false, actual research has revealed historic references to just such reactions by pilots to strange electromagnetic phenomena and unexplained fogs that caused all their navigational gear to suddenly go erratic. Among the historic encounters is the entire crew of the British ship Mohican in 1904 and Charles Lindbergh in 1928 while flying Spirit of St. Louis from Havana. Modern re-encounters with such electromagnetic fogs are documented since 1970, 6 years before Lindbergh would admit to his own encounter in the Triangle in his 1976 book, Autobiography of Values. There is nothing novel in old and new reconfirming aspects of the Bermuda Triangle's enigma, or the cart of legend coming before the horse of fact. Aircraft disappearances, for example, are fairly easy to document these days. Older incidents, though, they prove tenuous to extract from the obscurity of old archives, reveal remarkable continuity, and can seem to be little more than an earlier version of the latest case. All that is required is to adjust date and time. How are we all doing out there? We're moving through this pretty quickly. That's good. This continuity is remarkable, and it suggests that the vast majority of disappearances have the same factors contributing to them. These, at least in the most sensational and inexplicable cases, revolve around sudden, quote, fogs, end quote, electromagnetic phenomena, or such lightning-like disappearance, it seems, as if the aircraft simply, quote, winked out, end quote, both visually and on radar. Ultimately, the answer to the mystery of the triangle lies not just in unraveling and understanding the origins and potential of electronic fog, but in delineating exactly what needs solving in the first place. When someone asked, quote, "Do you believe in the Bermuda Triangle?" end quote, various giddy replies ensue, most often based on false impressions, urban legends, and knee-jerk reactions to popular or even bizarre theories. In essence, there can be no poignant answer to the question because the question itself has no perimeters. What, in essence, constitutes the, quote, Bermuda Triangle, end quote? While as many theories as legends exist, no investigator can proceed to a solution without accepting that to, quote, believe, end quote, in the triangle can initially mean only two things. To believe in what seems obvious, that it is an actual geographic area, and in parentheses, though the name is certainly unofficial, end parentheses, and two, that to, quote, believe in the Bermuda Triangle, end quote, means to accept its enigma. That is, that more ships and aircraft disappear in this area than in any other part of the world, for as yet no readily explainable reason. If not these two basic points, then otherwise the entire topic simply becomes an Ouroboros feeding in a shallow pool of questionable theory. History alone is the only perimeter that can define the Bermuda Triangle, inasmuch as it gives us context, and in that it is also the clearest step to defining the geography of the phenomenon. As early as 1887, the U.S. Hydrographic Office set up a study of derelict vessels in the North Atlantic. Under the guidance of then-Commander Charles Sigsbee, the study, which revolved around 1,628 abandoned vessels, concluded that the majority were to be found in the area around Bermuda to the southeast coast of the United States, the area today known as the Bermuda Triangle. Outside of this area, the largest concentration was to be found in the seas north and south of the Sargasso Sea and west of the Azores. However, many of these derelict vessels found here could be explained by their subsequent drift in the powerful Gulf Stream currents that flow through the triangle and then around the Sargasso Sea and back again to the triangle, indicating that whatever befell the crews did so in the area delineated today for the Bermuda Triangle, and the vessel, now deserted, continued to drift in the currents. To this day, the majority of disappearances and occurrences of abandoned vessels in the entire North Atlantic happen within the Bermuda Triangle and within these currents that we collectively call the Gulf Stream. They do not occur in the heart of the Sargasso Sea, the very center of the North Atlantic. For that matter, the heart of the triangle, which is nothing but the western approaches of the Sargasso Sea, is largely also devoid of disappearances, both then and now. This is actually at a contrast to the old sea legends. Ancient mariners in the days of sail dreaded and tried to avoid the Sargasso Sea because of its notorious calms. This is understandable since calms would delay a sailing ship. But the true area of disappearances and mystery, and hence the true, quote, triangle, end quote, is not the, quote, damnable Sargasso Sea, end quote. It is really a long whip lashing out from the Gulf and snapping through the heart of the Atlantic before it comes back to the warm Caribbean. It is not the drift of these powerful currents that has created the missing ships and planes by scattering the debris. In parentheses, the Coast Guard is well aware of the drift and takes this into account in any search. End parentheses. For tumultuous currents cannot make so many crews abandon their sound ship and plunge headlong into the very thing that has frightened them. Rather, it is over these powerful currents and in these odd latitudes where sailors have thrown themselves over to an unforgiving and abiding deep, or have taken there unawares, or have been taken there unawares. Of this encounter, the captain of the Mohican declared, quote, "The vessel was enshrouded in a strange metallic vapor, which glowed like phosphorus. The entire vessel looked as if it were afire, and the sailors flitted about the deck like glowing phantoms." End quote. The largest number of encounters with, quote, electronic fog, end quote, and transient electromagnetic phenomena are, probably not so coincidentally, also encountered in this area of the triangle. The difference between the triangle and those areas around the Sargasso Sea being that the currents in the triangle are the most powerful in all the collective Gulf Stream. Several theorists, including the late Ivan Sanderson, speculated that the powerful tangential currents played a key role in creating or exacerbating the electromagnetic aberrations. In attempting to dismiss the triangle's mystery, or at least enigma, it has also been pondered quite out loud why this present writer, who is solely responsible for bringing the subject back to life, is obsessive in never referring to himself in the first person, and why he is not more critical of the theories, especially in light of the fact that his other books are noted for investigation and critical analysis. Why, for example, here, would he even refer to Ivan Sanderson, an investigator of whom he has been critical? Quote, "I," end quote, will answer by saying that in this case, Sanderson, no matter what his other shortcomings were, may be quite correct, as we will later find out. And we have an illustration here. The subheading reads, "Marking only 100 cases of derelicts contained in Sigby's work highlights how the Bermuda Triangle has always been the center of deserted vessels. Arrows mark the drift of the currents." Of all the topics I have investigated and about which I have written, none of them has been as complex as this one, nor encompass so much. There is a difference between investigating a single event, serial killer, or quotient, and investigating hundreds of mysteries over centuries of time spread over hundreds of thousands of square miles of sea, hard to personally investigate. No one attempting to educate can limit data based on personal preference. That is indoctrination and not education. Nor can anyone deprive the devil of his due. I present this subject as a reporter and commentator and not as the critic. What I cannot solve or dismiss on evidence, I must include. Personally, I do not care for alien abduction theories and much of what and those who come with them. But that does not mean I can ignore Russian admirals, captains, and numerous other eyewitnesses to such things as, quote, flying saucers, end quote, that seem to make the Bermuda Triangle the center of their activity, nor the statements of credible witnesses, such as Simon Ludgate, whom I personally knew, when he reports that during the same flight in which their compass froze and then spun, he saw silver discs circling high overhead their aircraft. The reader must decide to what extent of a role these objects, for they have certainly been seen out there, have played in the litany of missing aircraft. The Bermuda Triangle is a tall and wide subject. It is not one man's theory. It is much more than disappearances. If I can conjure an old Kodachrome image of a flipper cereal, investigators shod in Van tennis shoes facing high seas adventure, but with enough mentality to appreciate the chords of ominous music when a derelict boat is found, when a pilot's panicky voice crackles over the receiver about a weird object, of eyes that brighten with the prospects when they gaze through the kaleidoscope of dancing shallows at a cyclopean edifice, then I have served the subject well. In continuing, one of the many arguments put forward to minimize the number of missing boats in the triangle as being suggestive of anything out of the ordinary is to point out that the triangle, at least in the Florida-Bahamas corner, is the pleasure boating capital of the world. And therefore the number of yachts that vanish is not by percentage out of proportion. Large numbers are merely statistically expected. On paper, this may look correct, but in practice it is not. Florida has spiraled into that void that follows past glory. Economic decline has seen thousands upon thousands of boats abandoned. There is no mystery in these cases, however. Before the Great Recession, the owners had been borderline boaters, seldom taking out their boats and keeping them only in a state of repair necessary to maintain them at anchor. Every county in Florida is now plagued by abandoned boats. Sailboats have sunk at anchor. Expensive old yachts and even Chris Craft or Broward's slump with bilges that need pumping. Power boats are abandoned in lagoons. Conchers, scallopers, and several types of fishermen lie deserted where they were left. To save on dock fees and eventually fines from special police who now give notices of a boat in danger of being considered a derelict, many have towed out their once prized boats and allowed them to drift away. Bermuda residents 1,000 miles away are complaining about the number that follow the Gulf Stream and drift by. Over wide sections of the triangle's most popular corner, in fact, it is becoming undeniably clear that the days of casual boating are bygone. Boats and parts of boats lie scattered as mementos to a more opulent age, on beaches, sunk in coves, or hauled out and ravaged in a sort of curious and fun birdhouse to investigate on a quay's bank at low tide. Interdicting drug running is almost a daily affair for the 7th Coast Guard. The boats and aircraft forced down are left where they are, each forming a contribution to a neglected open-air museum, to crime, and the progress of avionics and boating that many wilder parts of the Bermuda Triangle have become. But nowhere amongst these can be found the missing, not even a fraction of them. Those vanished in the Triangle are gone. They vanished in large numbers before the days of modern piracy and boat hijacking, and they continue despite all the law enforcement concentrated in this sensitive underbelly of a nation consumed with potential terrorism. And here we have somewhat of an illustration of a derelict boat just left. There's no caption on it. It is undeniable, however, that the number of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle has drastically declined over the last decade. It is not because there is no more, quote, electronic fog, end quote, nor are GPS and more advanced navigational aids responsible by preventing mariners and pilots from getting lost, in parentheses, though no doubt this has helped in some cases, end parentheses. For such advancements cannot prevent the disappearance of debris after an accident anyway. Besides, there are always a large number of perennially crude and miserly boaters who will not outfit their boats properly with EPIRBs and state-of-the-art electronics. The existence of this group is never a secret, since they are the ones who most noisily take offense when it is suggested that a bare minimum of safety must be legislated into effect. Although one might think that they're prime candidates for disappearing, fools go where angels fear to tread and invariably survive, though causing untold angst and frustration for the Coast Guard. No, the average boater is simply not transiting the seas anymore. Tens of thousands exist only on paper, and thousands more ride at anchor and are nearing the graveyard created by disuse. Logistics explain it. Sadly, it is not electronics or progress. Fewer travel far out, and thus fewer encounter an unchancy fate, whether this fate is natural or contrived. Fear of encountering pirates and being hijacked is also keeping boat owners in their safe harbor. Millions in cocaine and marijuana are being brought in along the Gulf side of Florida into the 10,000 islands area, where a battleship could get lost. The illicit trade is well organized and funded. Semi-submersibles are even being used in order to reduce the radar target on a scope. Interdicting these is quite rare, and the first was intercepted only within the last few years. Gunplay between pirates may even explain some odd mysteries. On one occasion, the Coast Guard picked up a lone bale of cocaine floating at sea. Since such illegal valuables are not stacked up on deck like crates of bananas and therefore not apt to fall overboard, such an article at sea testifies to some mystery which befell even a drug runner, or to some violent clash between modern-day pirates of the Caribbean. Florida's East Coast is one long beach and tourist mecca, not an environment conducive to the secretive rigors of smuggling, but its Gulf Coast is dark, full of mangrove lagoons, desolate river mouths, secret blue bays of undisturbed conch. Old rickety piers creep out cautiously from the jungles where boats can dock after coming in from Cuba. It is curious to note that it is on this side of Florida where a number of derelict vessels, having been crewed by only a single navigator, have been found, the owners completely vanished, victims perhaps of having been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the overall answer to the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle lies elsewhere. It is not in economic woes and the reduced number of travelers. Reduced numbers are a clue, but they are at best only a temporary clue. Something is not being fed. Disappearances are increasingly happening closer to shore than ever before, on short runs where boats have seldom been touched before. Derelicts are turning up on closer runs more than ever before. Something is coming closer to shore. For most, something figurative. But for some who have been touched by it, something literally is coming closer to shore. However true all the points raised here are, they nonetheless remain factoids. A solution to the triangle cannot be found in only one point by reducing it to an abstract. As abstracts are impersonal, intellectual general overlays, they can never be tempered by details. The truth of the triangle's enigma can only be found in coming down to cases. Before we delve into the developing changes in the triangle and the alarming possibilities they suggest, we must go back. We must relay the foundation and look into the vast litany of those lost. Without understanding these, the impact of the last decade cannot be fully appreciated. And with that completes Chapter 1. So we're going to find out some newer accounts here and how the turn of the 21st century has contributed to differences in the area. Like that last page we just read is pretty interesting. Something is literally coming closer to shore. I think we'll hear more about that as we read along. Yeah, it says right here, disappearances are increasingly happening closer to shore than ever before. On short runs, where boats have seldom been touched before. So this makes me wonder, is this energetic field moving just like how the magnetic poles have moved? Are we going to start seeing disappearances on land in Florida? It's a high possibility. Can't really rule that out if these perimeters are changing. And I mean, just look at this. It's going like, it's happening closer to the shore than what we were being told. Although, like in the center here, that's the Sargasso Sea. So that's all the still water. I don't think it would creep too much up onto land. But we might start seeing something happening along the coastlines, like right on land. Maybe a few 100 feet inland past the beaches. And that's probably about it. But who knows? Maybe the whole thing will shift. It'll go through the whole state of Florida, and then it'll go right into the Gulf of America, right? Who knows? So I see Beyond the Boxes joined the chat. Thank you, Brenda, for showing up. And don't worry about being late, because we got replays. You are all good on that. But make sure to go back and watch the new intro. I spent a good amount of time on that. And I think it sets up what we're going to be discussing here with modern day Bermuda Triangle, because we've covered from the mid-80s through the early 2000s, and now we're in the late 2010s with this next book. This was published in 2017. So compared to the last book, 2004? 2003 or 2004? That's why I say early 2000s. I can't recall off the top of my head easily all the time with the numbers. But 2017 is when this book was published. So it's only 8 years old compared to 41 years old when we started off here. And all these books have been great. So this third book that we're reading here, we're going to get some of the best stuff out of this. So I'm really looking forward to the next 10 to 12 parts of this series where we cover this entire book. Let me check real quick. Yeah, all the way up to part 40 on January 22nd of 2026. We'll be covering this book. We'll finish this book at the end of January. And we'll be doing this once a week, as usual. Some of the chapters we're splitting into two, because we don't want to spend too much time on all of this. But we knocked this out in just above an hour today. So I'm really happy with how quickly this show went. This is just an introduction to this new book that we're covering, and I'm excited to see what else is in store here. So that'll be it for today. I thank you all for being here. Make sure to hit the like button, and just make sure that if you missed the beginning of the show, go back and watch it. Go back and watch that intro. And Tuesday will be the next installment of Coral Castle. I'm not sure yet about a Let's Talk on Sunday because my temporary work has extended into Sunday morning, so that might interfere with everything. But that's going to do it for today. I appreciate you all being here. And until the next one, class dismissed.